Lesson 31, we come to a brand new kind of verb. We've been doing the omega verb up until now, and we have the whole omega chart finished. Now, if you look back in your book, you'll probably find that in the back, remember that paragraph 589, 598? We have a whole set of things done there now. The whole chart is done. And we're coming now to a new kind of verb, and that's the me verb. The ending is going to be me, iota. And we'll see how that goes just as soon as we look at the vocabulary. First vocabulary is aeonios, own, eternal, ondi, instead of, apodidami, is I give back, or I give what is owed or promised, I pay or whatever, apodidami. Yini, yinekos, yenekos, a woman. Yini, yenekos, a woman. Didami, I give. Egnon is the second aorist of UNESCO, I know. Exousia, authority. Eskon, I have. Zao, I live. Idu, behold or lo. Actually, idu, it's a particle, but it's really a demonstrative, an imperative word from orao. But we use it as a conjunction or as a demonstrative particle, behold or lo. That would be diagrammed above the sentence, behold and so forth. Monos ion, alone or only. Mysterion, a mystery or a secret. Orao, I see. We've been using this orao right along with apsume and idon and odaka and so forth, but we've never seen orao before. Now here it is, I see. The paradidami, I deliver over, I betray, is another way of saying that, paradidami. Pirazo, I tempt. Pios, aon, what sort of. Simon or Simonos, Simon, and then Kyros, a hand. We had Kyros in 1 John already. Now, because this is a new kind of verb, we want to show you something about it that will last us for these three chapters, 31, 32, and 33. So we'll give an overview of me, and then we'll come back. The omega conjunction as opposed to the me conjunction. Now, the present active indicative forms are going to be me, sigma, si, and then men, te, asi. The me verbs are only different in the present and in the aorist, present and second aorist. The rest of them are regular. We're going to see that as Machen says it. But the present and the second aorist we do need to look at. Didomi is the word, and the stem is over here. The stem is going to be either the delta omicron, or delta omega, or delta omicron epsilon. In other words, it will be one of those. Here, this one is the second of the two. This is the long O vowel. This is the reduplication for the present tense, as we're going to see. So, dithemi, stem, though, or thu. Tithemi, stem, here, theta epsilon, eta, or epsilon iota. Aphiemi, this is the one we talked about in 1 John, and I said that this was the stem, that's all the stem there is. This is a preposition, remember, and this is the sign of the present, so when you get down to it, that's the only part of the stem there is. So the stem will be either epsilon, eta, or epsilon iota. In one of those forms will be the stem. And then istemi, the stem will be this right here, sta, or sti, in that. And there's something else we need to see on all four of these, and that is the sign of the present, which is called a reduplication. Now, we've had reduplication before, but it was with epsilon and the beginning consonant. Here we have the reduplication in the present tense, not the perfect. D, that's the reduplication for dithemi. The reduplication for tithemi. This is the sign of the present. Well, I guess we wouldn't call it a reduplication, but the sign of the present for the aphiemi and the sign of the present for istemi. Now, those things will be helpful to you as we go further into the me verbs. I want to go through this chapter with Machen, the way Machen does it, so that you will have it, you can mark it, and so forth. One thing that we're going to talk about is the paragraph 484, and that is the principal parts. It's important that you learn the principal parts, especially of these verbs. So if you're doing this for credit, then you will want to learn the principal parts of dithemi, and I'll tell you the others as we go along, but dithemi for sure. Dithemi, doso, edhoka, dedhoka, dedheme, and dothin. Now, we have that on the tapes, remember. We have them on the end of the third tape. We'll have all the principal parts of 64 irregular verbs. Pick them out of there, learn them, and be very helpful to you. Paragraph 485, the stem of dithemi is do, he says there. And then the future of doso, the future of dithemi doso, is entirely regular. See, doso doesn't have the reduplication because it is in the present system. So, entirely regular. I've underlined in my book all those entirely regulars. The future is entirely regular. The first aorist is quite regular, except that the kappa stands instead of a sigma. But once you learn that principal part, then you can say everything else. Paragraph 489, the perfect middle is quite regular, says Machen. Paragraph 490, the aorist passive is quite regular. So let's not be concerned about all those forms. All we have to really concentrate on is the present and the aorist. So we'll take care of that. Paragraph 492, he gives you the present system. We've already mentioned that the me and the sigma and the si, mentes, asi, are the endings. So learn those like you did the o, isi, omaneti, usi before, and get that squared away. Then, notice that there's no variable vowel. Paragraph 496 gives us the present active subjunctive. Notice when he says present, there's always that present reduplication. Then there's the do, dos, do, dom, and dote, dosi. Say that 10 times fast. The present active subjunctive forms. Then he gives you the present active imperative. And again, we have the to, tet, to, san that we found in the imperative before. Because the delta iota is on there, because it's reduplication. The stem you see in this particular form is the delta omicron. So, round down the paragraph 499, didoni, didone. The ne there is the infinitive ending. The participle, he gives you the nominative in paragraph 500, and 501 he gives you the genitive, because you need both of those, you remember, to do the declension. So, didusa, didon is the present. Follow around down just like the third declension in the masculine and neuter, and the first declension in the feminine. Then the imperfect is in paragraph 503. Edidun, un, us, u, omen, ote, osan. So you take the present system, put an augment on it, epsilon, and you have the imperfect. Because the imperfect is part of the present system, it also is affected by this new ending that it has. I think that before we go on, we ought to go back in the back of the book, page 244. Page 244 on the one side and 245 on the other will give us some very enlightening moments here. Turn your book to paragraph 596, page 244. See? Then go right down. You see the present active indicative, then you see the subjunctive we just talked about, the imperative we just talked about, the infinitive, and the participle. You see all those in the present system. That's on the left-hand side. Paragraph 597 on page 245, you see the second aorist indicative. The indicative is quite regular. The subjunctive, if you look across the page, you'll see that the subjunctive is exactly like the present, except that there's no reduplication. Take the delta iota off, and you have the aorist. So you won't be learning new forms. Just take the delta iota off, and you have the aorist active subjunctive. The same is true of the imperative, except for that one second person singular. We've already learned to distrust that so many times. but you have the to, tat, tos on there, and without the present tense reduplication. The infinitive, little different in that the stem is different. The stem in the present is thon, that is the delta omicron, but in the aorist, it's omicron epsilon. So otherwise it's the same. And then the participle, same thing, except no reduplication. So I would say learn your forms from back here. Learn the forms from page 244 and 245, and that would make it much simpler, I think, for you. Now there's some little bit of grammar we need to look at. In paragraph 516, you see the second aorist of ginosko is egnon, and if you look back on page 249, you'll see the forms for that. Paragraph 518 says that sometimes there's an article before men or the, and when it is, it should be translated like the personal pronoun, he, she, or it, or even they, depending on the on whether it's singular or plural. Let's look at the example. Oh, the apokrithi aftis. This, they ask him, or they ask him this. But the they is simply the oh. And the same thing, I think you see the illustrations there. Then in the aorist, paragraph 520, the aorist active participle denoting the same time or the same act as the leading verb. We have this in the Gospels very often when we have the Jesus saying, Jesus said by way of answer, or Jesus answered and said. I think King James says mostly. Jesus answered and said. That really is simply a passive participle usually. Apokrithis, ipen o Isus. Jesus answered and said is not really it. Jesus in answer said, or answering Jesus said. So it refers to the same act, and we should not be using the after Jesus answered he said. That wouldn't quite do it. He said it while he was answering, you see. And the aorist participle then will not be antecedent time in that case. The same is true of the example on page 207. He answered and said, or he in answer said, or answering he said, whatever. I would still, I think, diagram that participle under the verb, because it is an aorist participle, it is predicate position, so diagram it under the verb, but translate it as though it were the same time as the verb, because indeed it is. In paragraph 521, he says the first aorist endings of the second aorist stem. He's talking about epon here. Most of the time you see epon with an omicron, but sometimes it also has an alpha. So don't let that throw you. In fact, he'll throw one in, I'm sure, in these exercises somewhere. And so don't let it throw you. If it's epon or epon, it doesn't matter. It's simply the same word, he said. Well, this is going to take a little study. It's going to take a little work to get these forms down, but it shouldn't be too much trouble. And once you get this down, then you're going to be ready for chapters 32 and 33. But before we go off here, we want to look at 1 John chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. In your 1 John section, you had beloved. Now this is a nominative case, as you can see, but this is a vocative. Remember, we've been saying don't pay any attention to the vocative. Well, for the most part, the vocative form isn't used. It's the nominative that's used for it. And this is simply direct address. Beloved, and then he goes on and says something to the beloved. We had it before tekniamu. Tekniamu, my children do this. Same thing. Agapiti, I write to you not a new commandment. Now, he's not saying I am not writing to you, so the uk is not here. The uk really comes before endolene, and it is modifying that. I'm writing to you not a new commandment, but I write an old commandment, and it's the commandment which you were having from the beginning. This is an irregular form for the imperfect of echo. You'd expect an epsilon there. Remember, we had this with thelo. It's ethelone instead of ethelone, which you'd expect. Well, this is an extra long instead of an eta, which you'd expect. So this is the imperfect, which you were having from the beginning. And this, of course, is the relative pronoun referring back to endoline. Which commandment is it? It's the commandment which you were having from the beginning. So this is a relative clause used as an adjective modifying endoline. Then, finishing up the verse, he says, the old commandment is the word. Which word? The word which you heard. So again, another relative clause. John is really using the relative clauses here. That's 2:7. Our verbs are very simple. They're present active indicative, present indicative, imperfectly mentioned, and then this one is a sigma alpha aorist. Verse 8. I write again to you a new commandment, which is true in him and in you. Now here we have a relative clause modifying endoline, which is true in him and in you. Adjective use. Then he says, I'm writing this commandment because the darkness is passing away and the new light already shines. So a new light already is shining. And that's why he's writing this new commandment. And the new commandment is that you love one another. And he's saying, the darkness is passing away, the new day is dawning, so love one another, expecting the Lord to return, who gave us that commandment. It's a very, very good verse. OT here being used as answering the question why. Why do I write to you? Because. OT in the adverbial clause. We're getting down near the end of Machen now. We have chapter 32. We're going to be doing more me verbs, and then we'll get another 2 verses done in 1 John.